Billy Graham was born on November 7, 1918 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Graham was raised in Charlotte and his family's dairy farm with 3 other siblings. His parents were William and Morrow Graham. From his humble beginnings and the son of a dairy farmer, it was unexpected that this young man would soon become one of the greatest evangelists of the 20th century. In a time of hard work and economic downturn, Billy Graham finally found his start in becoming an evangelist. In May of 1934, at the age of 16, Graham attended revival meetings by Mordecai Ham, a Baptist evangelist. Traveling preachers and Christian businessmen held an entire prayer meeting on the Graham farm. Billy was soon raised and dedicated his life to Christ because of the revival meetings. In the late 30s, Graham attended his first college in Temple Terrace at the Florida Fundamental Bible Institute. 2 of Graham's mentors at his Bible school recognized Graham's gift for preaching, and after his graduation, Billy Graham pursued his studies in a larger campus called Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. Graham met his future wife, Ruth Bell, and married her on August 13, 1943. After his graduation in Wheaton, Billy became pastor of the Western Springs Baptist Church in Chicago and preached through the Midwest. Torrey Johnson, a radio host, launched Youth for Christ International, YFC, in 1945, and Billy became a full-time employee there. In these years, Graham developed his styles of preaching that would bring millions into the life of God. In 1948, Graham became president of the Northwestern Bible College in Minneapolis and held the position for 4 years. Quickly after these events, Graham's life and ministry would take a mark into history. In 1950, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association was founded. Billy Graham, George Beverly Shee, Cliff Barrows, and Grady Wilson set off to make crusades that would affect millions of people all around the world. Graham's ministry held worldwide reputation and was on the television, newspapers, the radio, and even movies. Graham did his first great crusade in 1949 in the city of Los Angeles. They built the largest tent ever made for a revival meeting called the Canvas Cathedral. Over 350,000 attendees happened in the 2-month period inside the Canvas Cathedral. Every Sunday afternoon and evening, gospel music was performed by Beverly Shee and his team and was directed by Cliff Barrows. People would then sit down to hear Dr. Billy Graham preach.
Preached in the power of the Spirit by Dr. Billy Graham to the salvation of thousands.
I do not believe that any man can solve the problems of life without Jesus Christ. There are tremendous marital problems. There are physical problems. There are financial problems. There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Furthermore, Graham's crusades increased in numbers and popularity as the years went by. Billy Graham broke barriers in his association all around the world by his crusades, by founding a huge organization that would make a long-term impact to Christianity, evangelism, and the world. In total, Graham had conducted 417 crusades and reached more than 210 million people in over 185 countries and territories. Graham had crusades in Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, and South and North America. Graham's longest crusade took place in New York City in Madison Square Garden in 1957, which lasted 16 weeks. Graham's crusade with the biggest audience was 1.1 million people, which assembled at Yodo Plaza in Seoul in North Korea. Billy Graham's radio broadcast Our Decision aired for over 66 years, and a total of 700 radio stations around the world carried it. Graham wrote 33 books and even made films such as The Man in the Fifth Dimension and The Restless Ones. In 1964, Billy Graham and his team accepted the invitation to build an evangelistic pavilion placed near the New York's World's Fairgrounds. The pavilion was located on a 50,000 square feet plot of ground and housed theaters, offices, and counseling rooms. In the theater, they ran the short film Man in the Fifth Dimension for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The fair visitors were an estimated 70 to 80 million, as a crowd of several fairgoers watched Billy receive the George Washington Carver Memorial Institute Award, an award given to people to increase science and sustainability. Besides Graham focusing on entertainment and deliberately using the secular world to spread the gospel, Graham practiced what he preached.
Some people are predicting the possibility of a race war. It's not a problem in Alabama alone. It's a world problem, wherever you have two races living. Is there an answer? Yes, there is an answer.
Billy Graham broke barriers in segregation and civil rights. Graham helped spread equality and righteousness, especially in America. When Graham brought his large gatherings and crusades in the South in the 50s, Graham was alarmed at ropes separating the whites and blacks and took down the ropes himself when the usher refused to do so. Graham had a close relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. and invited him to join a 16-week revival meeting in New York City in Madison Square Garden, where 2.3 million people gathered.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Graham, I believe you've just been informed of the tragic death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, and I was just informed about 5 minutes ago, and it comes as one of the greatest shocks of my entire life. His friends called him Mike, and that's the way I knew him.
Billy and Martin were good friends, and a lot of whites damned Billy for that. They said, "Why would you hook yourself up with a communist? He's no good." Billy said, "No, he's my brother."
Billy received major criticism and controversy as he was inviting a black person to share a stage on the booth. In 1963, Graham bailed money to release Dr. King from jail during the civil rights protests in Birmingham. In conclusion, changes that the ministry helped enforce was the civil rights movement of 1964 that ended segregation laws in America. Graham also went to South and West Africa to end apartheid, which was a policy that instituted racial segregation from the 40s until the early 90s.
Christianity is not a white man's religion, and don't let anybody ever tell you that it's white or black. Christ belongs to all people. He belongs to the whole world.
Billy Graham broke barriers by starting one of the biggest Christianic worldwide movements of the 20th century. The Lucerne movement was founded in 1974, and the first International Congress on World Evangelism was met in the Lucerne Continuation Committee to begin the movement. 2,700 Christian leaders from 100 countries gathered in Lausanne, Switzerland. The committee was made to organize evangelistic leaders into world evangelism. Never before had so many representatives gathered together from so many evangelical churches. According to the book Encyclopedia of Christianity in the Global South, the encyclopedia explains how Time magazine quotes toward the Lucerne movement as possibly the widest-ranging meeting of Christians ever. Graham and the Lucerne movement's resistance served thousands of churches and hundreds of world's missions organizations. The outcome of the historic gathering influenced mission efforts across every continent, igniting a movement across the globe. One of Graham's biggest goals was to preach to the Soviet Union. In 1982, Graham finally did a peace conference in Russia. Graham was criticized severely as he entered Russia, and 2 years after the first conference, Graham returned to preach in numerous churches. Graham had preached in Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea. Billy had personally spoken to many world leaders and helped mentor them, such as Queen Elizabeth II, Winston Churchill, Mikhail Gorbachev, and Pope John Paul II. One of the greatest examples of Graham's mentorships toward leaders is the President of the United States. Graham was involved in politics and had spoken and befriended with 13 presidents from Harry S. Truman to Trump. To ultimately conclude, Billy Graham and his ministry broke barriers by ordaining crusades all around the world, enforcing civil rights, and starting one of the biggest Christianic movements of the 20th century.
He's alive. I've given my life not to a dead Christ, but to a living Christ. And he's given me a song to sing. He's given me a flag to follow. I have reason for existence. I know where I've come from. I know why I'm here. I know where I'm going. Do you?